My name is Dr. Marcus Lane. I've been a forensic pathologist for over 17 years. I've worked on high-profile murder cases, closed hundreds of cold cases, and testified in front of juries more times than I care to count. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what I found on the table that rainy Monday morning. The call came in late Sunday night. Teenage male, apparent suicide, found by hikers in the woods near Crescent Hills. Local PD ruled it self-inflicted. There was a note, a deep wrist wound, no signs of struggle. Clean. Too clean. If you ask me. They brought the body in around 2 a.m. I didn't touch it until morning that he was 17. Caucasian. Slender frame, bruising around the neck, not in the report. His name was Jackson Reed, and something about him didn't sit right with me from the start. Maybe it was the way his eyes were half open, as if he died mid-thought, or the fact that his clothes were damp, but his socks were perfectly dry that I flipped through the case file. Sparse. Only 4 pages. 2 photos. The suicide note was attached, but photocopied, not original. No toxicology report. No detail on time of death. No mention of the bruising I'd just noticed. That's when my instincts kicked in. I began the autopsy at 7:42 a.m. Internal examination revealed no water in the lungs, but signs of blunt force trauma to the ribs. Not noted in the file. Lacerations on the left thigh, deliberate, shallow, as if someone wanted it to look self-inflicted, but didn't know how deep a real suicide cut goes. I paused. The wrist wound was angled inward. That suggested right-handedness. Jackson was left-handed, confirmed by his school records and yearbook. Quotes written in distinct, slanted script. Why would a left-handed teen cut his right wrist at that angle? The biggest shock came when I removed his shirt fully and saw faint letters etched into the skin near his ribs. Faded, but legible under UV light. R.K. lied. It was scratched, not carved. Old. Possibly days before death. I took photos, logged every detail, then picked up the phone to contact Detective Harlow. The officer listed in the report, no answer. I called the precinct. They told me Detective Harlow had been transferred 6 months ago. The report I had was outdated, possibly fake, and my heart started to race that I did something I hadn't done in years. I broke protocol. I contacted Jackson's parents. His mother was the one who answered. When I told her I was the examiner handling Jackson's case, she went quiet for almost a full minute. Then, in a shaky voice, she said, "But we were told there wouldn't be an autopsy. They said it was open and shut. Why are you calling us now?" That was the first red flag. By noon, I was in my office alone, staring at the report, my photos, and that name. R.K.IT was burned into my brain. I decided to check school records. There were 2 students with those initials in Jackson's senior class. One had moved out of state a year ago. The other was Rachel Keller, varsity cheer captain, model student, and, according to online posts and tagged photos, Jackson's ex-girlfriend. The plot thickened. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept going over the bruising, the scratches, the fake report. This wasn't suicide. This was a cover-up, and someone powerful wanted it buried. I didn't know it then. But opening that file cracked the first layer of something much, much darker. And someone already knew I was asking questions, because the next morning, my office was broken into, but nothing was stolen. Only the photos of the bruising were missing. The moment I walked into my office and saw the drawer ajar, my stomach dropped. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. My desk was neat, the autopsy table untouched, and the lights were still flickering. In that annoying way I'd been meaning to fix. But then I opened the bottom filing drawer, where I'd placed the UV photos of Jackson Reed's torso, and found the folder empty. Just that one folder. The others, cases from months ago, were still there. No one took anything else. Just the images that showed the words, "RK lied." Whoever it was, they knew exactly what to look for. I reviewed the security footage, but of course, the camera pointed at my office had been malfunctioning. The recording cut off at 2:13 a.m. and resumed at 3:08 a.m. I called building security, but they shrugged it off. Probably a glitch. Sure, a glitch that just so happened to skip over a break-in. The police were even less helpful. Probably a clerical error. The officer told me over the phone. Misplaced files, maybe? I'm a forensic pathologist. I don't misplace evidence. I knew I was alone on this. And worse, I was being watched. That afternoon, I returned to Jackson's body. Something was nagging at me. The lacerations on his thigh weren't just random, they looked patterned. I hadn't noticed before, but when I viewed them under magnification, they resembled letters, crude, partial, faded, but enough to read one word: basement. I shivered that it could have been a coincidence, or my mind trying to assign meaning to chaos. But deep down, I knew it wasn't random. Jackson had been trying to communicate. Even in death, that I pulled up his home address from the original, and likely fake, report. A quiet, suburban street. I shouldn't have gone. I know that. But my gut said the truth wasn't on the table anymore. It was somewhere else. When I arrived, the house was dark. Abandoned. A foreclosure notice on the door. The neighbors said the Reeds had moved out. Just 3 days ago. Packed everything in a hurry and disappeared. No forwarding address. Still, I walked around back. The sliding door had been shattered, shards of glass on the patio like fallen stars. Inside, the air was thick with mold and decay. Furniture gone. Holes in the wall. It looked ransacked, but not by movers. The basement door was slightly ajar. I descended the creaking stairs with nothing but my phone flashlight. The air was colder than upstairs. Damp. I scanned the concrete floor and found faint, chalky drawings, circles, arrows, words too smudged to read. And in the far corner, behind a stack of cinder blocks, I found a hidden door that it looked like part of the wall, painted over, but when I pressed it, it clicked. Inside was a small room, maybe 6 feet wide, covered in soundproof foam. And in the center, a chair bolted to the floor, straps on the arms, and blood. Old, dried, but unmistakable. This wasn't a panic room. It was a torture cell. I took photos, shaky, half-blurred, and backed out. As I reached the top of the stairs, again, I heard a door creak. Not from behind me, from upstairs. Someone else was in the house. I killed the light, heart pounding in my throat. I stood frozen behind a beam in the hallway as footsteps echoed above me. Slow, searching, then they stopped. I held my breath. The silence felt like it could shatter me. A second later, the front door creaked again. Slammed. I didn't wait. I bolted. Out the back. Over the fence. Into my car. When I got home, I opened my laptop to upload the basement photos, only to find that my Wi-Fi was down, and my cell? No signal, just one notification. Airdropped, somehow. No sender. Just a message. Stop digging, or you'll end up like him. I barely slept that night. I kept going over the message, the basement, the missing photos, everything. Whoever sent that threat was close enough to airdrop it. That meant they'd followed me, watched me, maybe even knew where I lived. I started thinking like a forensic expert again. Finally, paranoia only gets you so far. I needed to analyze. First, the chair, bolted to the floor, straps on the arms and ankles. Whoever used it wanted the victim still, contained. Second, the blood on the soundproof foam. There'd been no attempt to clean it. Third, there were gouges in the armrests, fingernail marks, which meant at least one victim had been conscious. Jackson? I checked back through his medical reports. Minor bruising on the wrists. Nothing that screamed restraints. But if he was tied tight enough for blood flow to restrict, the damage might have faded before death. But the original report had none of that. What really got me was the missing toxicology. I'd ordered it myself, and now there was no trace of it in the hospital system. Not pending. Not processing. It had vanished. I called an old friend, Maya. She was a tech forensic analyst, formerly of the FBI, and she owed me a favor. I asked her to dig into the police case file for Jackson Reed. An hour later, she called back. Her voice was dead serious. That file doesn't exist anymore. Not in the system. Not under the case number. Not under his name. It's like it was purged. Who could do that? She hesitated. Not your average beat cop. I thanked her and hung up. There was only one explanation left. Someone inside the system was wiping this kid off the map. But why? Later that day, I met with Jackson's guidance counselor. She was reluctant, afraid to talk, but I promised anonymity. She said Jackson was quiet, smart, kept to himself. But 2 weeks before he died, he became jumpy, distracted, paranoid that he mentioned something about not trusting Mr. K. That stopped me cold. Mr. K? I asked. Who was that? She frowned. He didn't say. That was the weird part. Just called him Mr. K, like we'd know who he meant. I thought about the words burned into Jackson's torso. RK lied. Mr. RK, not just a cryptic message. A name. An accusation. But who? I searched faculty records. No one in his school with those initials. So I went broader. Court records. Department of Education. Local government. Then, in an unrelated police report, I found the name Richard Cavanaugh, former juvenile corrections officer and recently hired as a youth behavioral consultant by the Department of Education. No fixed office. No public phone number, but I found his face, and I'd seen it before. In one of the background officers at Jackson's autopsy. Not in uniform, standing in the shadows, watching. Not one of ours. It was him. Now I was sure. I called Maya again. Told her everything. She paused. You need to get out of your house tonight, she said. Why? Because I ran a thermal scan from your IP address just now. There are 2 other devices pinging from your home. They're not yours. They're in my house. Yes. I left everything. Laptop, hard drives, evidence. I got in my car and drove with nothing but my wallet and keys. I stayed at a motel near the interstate. That night, someone broke into my apartment. The landlord called me the next morning. They didn't steal anything, but they burned all my files, every photo, every note. Gone. Except one thing. Under my pillow, left like a calling card, was a printed copy of the same UV image I'd lost, Jackson's torso, highlighting the scarred words, and on the back, final warning. You're not one of us. Stay that way. Asterisk. I stared at the image left under my pillow. The scarred words, RK lied, seemed to burn brighter now. I wasn't just dealing with a cover-up. This was a deliberate silencing machine. And I was now a target. I called Maya again. We have to finish this, I told her. There's one more autopsy I need. She understood immediately. You're thinking of the other kids, aren't you? Exactly. Jackson wasn't the first. We pulled up old juvenile case records. Ones with unexplained deaths, sudden disappearances, no cause listed. Within hours, we found a pattern. 5 teenagers over the last 2 years. All low income. All passed through the same private juvenile rehabilitation program in the outskirts of the county, funded in part by the Department of Education and run by a man named Richard Cavanaugh. That we found a name for the program. Pathway Solutions. Supposedly, a reformation initiative, but the building had no current license. The property had been abandoned 6 months ago. I drove out there. The place was surrounded by chain-link fence, rusted and sagging. Inside were rows of trailers, a gutted main building, and one storm cellar door behind what looked like a supply shack. I didn't go in unarmed. A friend from the force lent me a concealed pistol. I descended into the basement with a flashlight. The smell hit me first. Mildew, copper, decay. Then the cage, same size, same straps, same blood pattern. But this one had something different. Tapes. A stack of old mini DV cassettes labeled with names and dates. All initials. All teenage boys. All between the ages of 14 and 17. I took one. Popped it into an old camcorder I found near the table. The footage showed a kid, scared, strapped down. And a voice behind the camera. Calm, rehearsed, methodical. Do you understand why you're here? The boy didn't answer. Then another voice. Cavanaugh. Calm, instructional, like a therapist. This is to correct you. To make sure you never lie again. And then, the screaming began. I shut it off. It was enough. I sent everything to Maya. Told her to go public if she didn't hear from me in 12 hours. That was my last move. I turned the evidence over to the state investigator's office, anonymously, through a lawyer friend. No trails. No names. Within days, the media exploded. Illegal juvenile facility tied to government consultant, unlicensed behavior program linked to teen deaths. Whistleblower forces investigation into state-funded abuse. Cavanaugh disappeared, but he didn't stay gone. 1 week later, I received a letter type NO return address. You exposed one monster, but we made many more. The system protects itself. You're still a part of it. I quit my job shortly after that, not because I was afraid, but because I couldn't pretend anymore. Every autopsy I'd done before Jackson's felt like it meant something, like I was helping bring closure. But now I knew better. I knew some bodies aren't buried in the ground. Some are buried in files, and some in lies. The end.